standing on the unceded land of the Caddo Wichita Comanche people. We honor the generations of stewardship these indigenous peoples have given to the water, air, and land. Hi, my name is Tiffany Jackson, and I am the Director of Education for the Bishop Arts Theater Center. We're excited to bring you this interview series with several playwrights who received commission awards for our How to Be project, 10 Plays for Racial Justice. These videos are generously sponsored by our presenting sponsor, the Frederick Loewe Foundation. In 2021, we commissioned 10 Texas-born or based playwrights to pen a script based on Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's best-selling book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. BATC will produce the world premiere of this powerful, brilliant, and deeply moving festival beginning February 17th through March 6th. These performances are timely and have never been more important in the fight for our shared humanity. We are thrilled to hear from a few creative minds behind our How to Be project.
Hi everyone, my name is Morgana Wilborn. I am the director of How to Be. And I am joined with one of our 10 awesome playwrights of this wonderful festival that kind of goes deep into Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And Oba William King is here, a wonderful griot storyteller who, in his wonderful one-person piece, Water Fountain, 1967, he talks about his family and his life. Oba, how are you doing today?
I am well. Grateful for this opportunity to share some more story.
Yes.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. So we got to spend some time together, and you shared with myself and Sean Lauren a lot of your personal story. And in this, your personal story takes us on a journey as a young boy. And one particular moment in your piece is when you were thirsty and decided to drink from a whites-only water fountain. But you were reprimanded by a white man who wanted to make you pay for the choice you made. In this moment in time, and knowing you and so much you shared with us about like your imagination, your childhood, your innocence, your family, do you feel that this particular moment in history, much of or any of your childlike innocence was taken away because of that incident or any other policies or beliefs that existed at the time?
Wow, that's an excellent, awesome question, and I hadn't thought about it in that way. But there's two feelings that I get. The memory of Countee Cullen's poem called Incident, and then the memory of this water fountain situation. Well, I didn't know I was doing anything wrong because we grew up in California, so it wasn't a colored only, white only water fountain situation. We were just all out, and there's a hose on the ground and there's a fountain, so we just go for what's clean. Being scarred by it, I don't think that I recall in a way where it left me in any way afraid of the people that we might encounter when we returned home. I did, however, as I grew older and began to study poetry, I was very attracted to the piece called Incident, which talks about once traveling in old Baltimore, my head filled with glee. I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now, I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger. And so I smiled, waved my hands. He stuck out his tongue and called me nigger. I traveled all through Baltimore from May until December. And of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. And that piece of poetry took me back there for the very first time. We were just studying the work of African American writers and poets, and Gwendolyn Brooks, and that piece called McKay and Paul Dunbar and Langston Hughes. But never did if anything, it gave me an understanding of the gravitas of that piece of poetry. All of the hurt and pain that would be wrapped up in hearing that vile word thrust upon you. But yes, I don't remember in childhood that it left me in any way scarred. More of my story, I remember the strength of my father being. Once I got within eyesight of my dad, I was safe.
Yeah. I love that part of your story. Yeah, because your father's like, no.
Not today.
Not today. So speaking of parents, at the end of your story, you stated that you saw what racism was, and at the same time, you learned how to end it. Do you believe that racism continues to be an issue because some parents avoid having the conversation with children?
Oh my gosh, it's the most frightening thing about this whole conversation that we're having about critical race theory.
Right.
And it's just, the new boogeyman. And the fact that critical race theory is not being taught in the schools, but because you can say that and people can imagine what all that means. Yes, you have to, within our story, we talk about the Sankofa bird. You have to know where you come from in order to understand where you're going. And that we don't address racism in America. And even today, it's being pushed out of reach for students in school. There's particular books they're trying to ban. And there are books that address some of these issues or some of these moments in history. And then there's the parents of the children who don't want them to see that ugly, because they were the ones that spit and snarled and stomped their feet because a person was not the same skin tone as them. But if we don't show that horrific side of the capability of human nature, we're bound to repeat it. So yes, I'm sure that when we address it straight, face to face, there's not a gentle way. It's not, in order to put down hate, you bring more hate. I don't think that at all. I truly believe that to put down hate, you have to smother it with love. And as long as you've got yourself in that spirit of, helping, of sharing, of being open-armed, and that's the nature of us as a people. We've always been an open-armed people. Even as far back as you can go into the African land, to the boat ride, to being on the plantations. We have a tendency to want to help, to want to make things better. And more so than not. And so in those situations where we're faced with hate, I saw, like through my grandmother's eyes, and that desire to smother it with love. To talk about, don't you remember when we did this and our families did that? And find a way to get to that soft place in the angry person's heart.
Right.
Yes.
I love that. Of course, you go the Sankofa, going back to the past, bring forward, which is useful. As a poetic storyteller, do you think it's important to continue sharing stories about racism when some might feel that it prevents the community from healing? Kind of like what you're saying. We got to change that paradigm shift. Create a paradigm shift. Create a sense of healing through that. Have there been other pieces that you have written or performed that have resonated in you through your own stories that you feel have brought healing to the space in that way?
Oh my goodness, yes. That I happened to be on that path of this type of work. I was introduced to the African American writers. One of the instructors that I absolutely adored, Kay Fulton, like 6'2" African American woman, full-bodied African American woman, and she had a best friend named Eleanor Llewellyn. And Eleanor Llewellyn, so Kay was the dean of dance. Eleanor was the dean of the literary arts department. And she introduced me to the African American writers. I was in dance class because I loved being there. It's just, that was where magic was happening. And it was as close to, I could get to theater at the time. I didn't know all the steps to get there, but I just liked the idea of performing. And Kay heard something in my voice and said, let me take you over to Eleanor. And she heard Paul Robeson, and had me to read his work out loud. And I'd study Ossie Davis or Dunbar, Langston Hughes, and bring those stories to life. And Langston Hughes had so much fun and energy in his writing, like Jesse B. Simple. And he would just get himself into the most precarious situations just because he really was simple. But he'd always get out of it just because he really was simple. And you could see in the way that he spoke and in the writing that they created, some of the humor in our in our lives in the 40s and the 30s and the 20s and the Harlem Renaissance. As bad as times were, you always found something that can bring light. There's times that in traveling around as a storyteller, traveling into different parts of the state, especially when I was in Illinois, and there's places that you go and it's, no sidewalks and what they call sundown towns. I think it was Pekin, Illinois, was the first time I was invited outside of Chicago as a storyteller. And there was a group of citizenry that said that they wanted to celebrate King Day at the time. And it was their very first King Day celebration. And I had stories of King and some of his pieces of his famous speeches and favorite stories of Dr. King, and just that desire to have a conversation with a room full of folk who wanted to talk about Dr. King. And oh my God, 20 years later, I was invited back and meeting people who were babies then, and now they're in charge of, the curriculum in the school. They're in charge of programming that they do.
Wow.
And I could see, not that I had a direct influence on it, but I happened to be there at the time that they were trying to change the paradigm.
Right.
And I was able to step into that role. I used to call myself an ambassador of Black people. I would go to places where Black folk hadn't been. And, and so, I had to carry myself in a certain way, and I make sure that, I cross my T's and I dot my I's. But being real about it and not having to hold your tongue because you're speaking through the works of great writers, introducing them to our literary excellence. And you always have that to fall back on. Monday, I'll leave from here in Dallas area going to Corpus Christi. And I'll have a morning of programming with the students in an elementary school, sharing poems and poetry from African American writers. And something in the preparation that I found that's going to be really interesting when I hear it out loud in front of this audience is the piece by Amanda Gorman, who did the presidential poetry last year, the Young. Well, I feel that the students will have kind of a lean toward her, and finding the work of Phyllis Wheatley, and how it was that she was the age that they are now when she began writing, and that length of time. That was during she was sold into slavery. And wrote poetry that was so significant, so necessary. Right. They had to publish it. She's the first African American woman to have a book of imaginative literature published in English. And how powerful that is. And when you read the poetry, it's not fluid. It's not the spoken word we hear today. But you can see how the period of time affected the imagination. And she was able to put it into words and rhythm and share it as art. So we have a powerful weapon as artists because art is going to break down the barrier, and then we can share, use truth as our sword, as we do,
Yes.
it can be powerful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that you've mentioned all of these wonderful, powerful Black women in life and history. And I want to go back to Mama Josie. And just in that love and peace that she brings. And if we think about Black women through history and just the power that, like you saw the power in your father, and this unique power that Mama Josie brought to the situation of being a peacemaker.
Yeah.
You feel that Black women have historically served as that peacemaker through history?
And as the image of strength and power too, and even in times where we didn't claim it or know it, but they talk all the time about the women who were sold into a plantation situation and had their own babies to raise and were the mammies to the children of the big house. How they nursed and cared for and nurtured and grew those children whose, for whatever reason, moms and mothers who were in that hierarchy, the slave owners, wives, couldn't be bothered by their children. And so what kind of powerful strength is that you're nursing and holding and caring for, nurturing the child of the man who will take the whip to your son. You know, that's a mad powerful strength. When you first started your question, in my mind came the song of Bill Withers' Grandma's Hands. Clapped in church on Sunday morning, played the tambourine so well, Grandma's hands. And then we grew up on that. She used to issue out this warning. She'd say, Billy, don't you run so fast. Might fall on a piece of glass. Might be snakes there in that grass. Grandpa's hands, you know. So that same, she'd just work as hard as anyone else if it was pulling tobacco or picking cotton or popping peas, whatever it was. She'd work as hard as anyone else, but had that strength of care to hold you. That's whose lap you climbed up in when you needed to go. You knew you needed to go to sleep. And there's a monster under the bed. You gonna climb up in grandma's lap.
Right.
What we do. That's our strength. Yes.
What's so funny is I think about, and I feel like you told Sean and I a similar story. Like when we think about grandmothers, you think their hands and the feel of their lips when you got to give them sugar.
Oh, yes. I forgot that. Yes. When it's time for sugar. Make me some sugar, baby. And you know, when you're 7 and 8 and 9, that's just the worst thing that could ever happen. You know.
Yes.
We'd rather disappear.
That's how I felt about my grandmothers. I'm like, oh man.
Oh,
I'm like,
the last thing I want to do. You know.
Oh man. Oh, but it's been such a blessing to share space with you.
So much.
Full of so much joy and history. And I just feel it emanating from your spirit, and I just receive with so much love for all the beings who will interact with your work and the rest of the works. Is there anything else for those who are, maybe they are, just meeting stories like this for the first time, or they are, sharing a beloved memory that it resonates in their spirit, even though y'all are two different people from two different times? Something you like as an elder in this world impart for us to think about as we move forward with the story?
Yeah, yes. I think, and it happens a lot for me as a storyteller, that we hear the instructions. We say the ancestors are speaking. That we stay in a mode of listening and understanding that those instructions that are the safety, the be careful, don't turn down that street, turn down the next street. Those are ancestors lighting the path, showing us the way. Then that the young people, as much as we're laughing about grandmama's kisses, it's not until grandmama is, in the hospital and we're all gathered around. She's, on that sick bed, and we wish we had another week.
Right.
If young people could just see their elders as reservoirs of knowledge, and that we were geared to cling to them, that we were geared to come in the house and sit by them, sit on the floor next to them and just drink knowledge. So much more I would have known already, doggone it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think all of that is connecting us to the past and giving us strength to continue to engage these hard conversations, whether it's around life, survival, racism, and healing.
Yes.
Thanks to our ancestors who've lived through, our elders still alive who could continue the story, and we downloaded from you all, like the baton.
Yes. There we go. Passing the baton. Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And putting you in a good position to run that next leg.
Right.
That's our responsibility, right?
Right.
If I'm holding on to the baton, I've got to get you in a good position so that when I pass it off to you, you make a good start. It's a good, clean pass. You're already in stride.
Right.
We just keep that stride. We have to catch that stride so that we find a way to communicate to each other. I think for some of us elders, we've got to understand our responsibility is to help make the world a better place. And if that means that we have to be a little bit uncomfortable by looking a whole group of young people in the eye, bringing them a smile, and in that way, like they say, the old Africans would welcome with their hands open, so that you see, I have no weapon against you. And that reach out and that hug, we're always in that reach out to embrace you mode. And sometimes the embrace is just saying hello. We use the strength of our voice and the courage we have. And sometimes it'll just happen. And then it's a moment or so later that you could see that young person looking back like, he just spoke to me out of the blue. I got one of those familiar faces too. So people may think like I might be their uncle or somebody. So they do act right when I come in the room.
Yes, sir.
I'm my mama's brother, so I'm act a little bit right, you know.
That is funny.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm going to reach out to you and embrace and love.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this evening. And I can't wait for everyone to share in your beautiful story, Waterfound 1967, part of the How to Be Festival. And I have the honor of facilitating the direction of this piece. Thank you for your knowledge, your love, and passing the baton to us to continue the...
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What a wonderful opportunity to share. As an artist, it's one of the greatest experiences that you can have is to share your work.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all. Thanks for taking it on. Thanks a lot.
Yes,